Hello everyone! Today I thought I would show you how I make molds for resin casting. I'm always learning about new products and new techniques, so this process may change over time, but that just means I can make an updated mold making video for y'all in the future. Today I am making a mold of this huge amethyst crystal. Go big or go home, right? The first thing we need to do is make a box or frame to put our crystal in. For this, I am using hot glue and chipboard. If I were making the mold of something smaller and lighter that may float in the silicone, then I would make this bottom out of tape or glue the piece in place on the chipboard with hot glue before I started. But this thing is so heavy that I knew this step was unnecessary. I go about cutting the sides to fit my piece. I want to eliminate as much waste of the mold maker as possible, so I am just following the edge of the crystal, making sure to leave at least ½ an inch of space so that the mold will have thick enough sides. I am also making sure that my sides will be tall enough. You want the sides at least 1 inch higher than the top of your piece to make sure there will be no spills over the side, and make sure you don't underfill the mold and end up with a thin bottom that will result in tearing when you remove your original piece from the mold. If you are really patient and precise, you can go around and measure all of the sides and figure out exactly what pieces you need before you begin, but I always just eyeball it. I am such a good example. I then hot glue each piece to the base, making sure that the sides are lining up pretty closely and that there are no major gaps that will be hard to fill in later. Once everything is glued to the base, it's time to start gluing the sides. I usually just pipe a bead of glue down the side and then hold the two pieces together until the glue is cool enough for the pieces to not separate when I move on to the next one. I usually go back around several times to make sure that there are no gaps or weak points where the mold maker may leak out. And that is our mold frame done. Now for the mold maker. There are a lot of mold makers on the market, and I have tried a few of them, but this one is my favorite so far. This is by the brand Smooth On, and it is Umu 30 silicone rubber. It mixes just like my resin, a 1:1 ratio, and I really like that both parts are colored so you can tell when they are really mixed together properly. I have also used Umu 25, which is pretty much identical to the 30 ones cured, with the exception of the color. The only difference is that the 25 cures in 75 minutes and has a pot life of 15 minutes, meaning how long you have to fiddle with it before pouring it, and the 30 cures in 6 hours and has a pot life of 30 minutes. I don't really prefer one over the other, it's just that this one is the one I happen to have at the moment. I have not tried any of Smooth On's other products, but I really want to test out some of their fast cure resins in the future. Anyways, now that everything is measured accurately and mixed thoroughly, it's time to pour it into our frame. Now I am pouring this in multiple stages just because I haven't made a mold this size before, and I wanted to make sure that it was fully cured throughout, so I just poured it in several layers, letting them cure in between pours rather than all at once. Now, one thing that I do, because I am cheap and mold maker is expensive, is I take the cured mold maker that is left in another cup from another mold that I have made, or other failed molds that just didn't turn out right, and I cut them into small pieces and fill in the spaces along the side. I am just adding bulk to the mold without wasting any of the mold maker. You just make sure that you smush out any air bubbles that might be trapped that will ruin the mold. It is a rather big risk if you are not super careful with getting all of the air out, but for the sake of a couple bucks, I'm willing to do it. Okay, so now everything is cured, it is time to demold. Strip away all of the chipboard. If you want to reuse any of these pieces, be extra careful removing them and probably take an X-Acto knife to cut the seams, but I just ripped into it like a kid on Christmas. The next thing is to make the mold opening as clean as possible. I cut away any extra spillover, or under really, with an X-Acto knife. I want to eliminate any overhang so that the air bubbles will not get trapped underneath any excess around the top. I choose to do this step now rather than later because it makes the original piece easier to demold and you get cleaner cuts this way. If you're afraid of damaging your original piece, then you can wait till after you demold it for this step. I then realized I should have sprayed some mold release on my piece and patched any tiny cracks with clay before I poured the mold maker onto it because it was quite difficult to wiggle it free. The reason that I didn't was that I was afraid that the oily nature of the mold release may cause discoloration to the stone, and I thought that since the crystals were so smooth, then there would be no problem demolding. But turns out the mold maker had seeped into the tiny cracks and really liked the rough surface below the crystals. I don't normally use mold release on my originals when casting a mold because the surface of whatever I am molding is usually pretty smooth, but if you have a rough surface or a very absorbent surface, then you may want to consider some mold release. Anyways, I finally got the crystal demolded and there wasn't too much of the mold material stuck on the crystals, and I was pretty happy with my new mold. Now at this point I deviate from the instructions that come with the mold maker. Shocking, I know, I didn't read the instructions. I hardly ever read instructions, and I certainly never follow them. But anyways, it's recommended to post-cure the mold by placing it in an oven at 150 degrees Fahrenheit for 4 hours to allow any residual alcohol and moisture to evaporate. This will eliminate the dreaded sticky resin when the surface of the resin stays tacky for several days after being removed from the mold. I did not do this step, one, because the only oven I had that was big enough was for food and food only. I use a small toaster oven to bake polymer clays and whatnot. And two, because I have little birdies in my house and I don't want to risk having the mold releasing chemicals that might harm them for 4 hours. I keep all of my resins and other chemical stuff out in my studio. So instead of oven curing, I simply let mine sit in a nice sunny spot for a day or two before casting resin into it. You can follow the instructions and bake it in the oven if you would like to. I'm not saying you can't. I'm just saying I didn't. That and I didn't read the instructions. Now comes the fun part. It's time to test out this mold and pour some resin into it. So I skipped to the part where it's already mixed up and ready to go. I have so many videos on how I mix and color my resin that I figured it wasn't necessary here. But if you would like for me to make a video where I just talk about the brands of resin that I use and how I use them, let me know in the comments. I didn't want to fill the mold all the way to the top because this piece and other pieces that I cast in this mold are for a specific project that I am working on that might be featured in a future video. I just wanted the crystal clusters at the very top, so I only filled it about half the way. I then waited overnight for the resin to cure and then I popped the piece out of the mold. Again, you can use mold release if you would like to. I did not for this project. I have a confession. I don't own mold release. I need to buy some, but it's really not necessary for 80% of the resin projects that I do, so I just haven't purchased any yet. Anyways, here's the mold and the cast resin piece. And here's just some close-up shots of the resin piece to show how much detail this mold maker actually captures. If you are still sticking around after all those shocking confessions about not following instructions and not owning mold release, and you would like to stick around a little longer, hit that subscribe button. If you found this video helpful, leave a like, and if you want more info or have an idea for a future video, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I hope everyone stays safe and have a great day. Bye.